final tissue type, the fourth tissue type that we'll talk about today, is nervous tissue. And nervous tissue is very important because it's used for communication. We're going to talk briefly about the cells that you would recognize today, but remember that this is very complex. When we get to the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system later in the 8 weeks, you're going to find that there's a lot of complexity. But for now, let's just try to understand nervous tissue. So as we've done with each of the previous types, let's start with function. Nervous tissue function is communication. And it's communicating in milliseconds. If I were to throw something at the camera, even though you know I'm not physically able to hit you with that object, you would probably blink or pull back away from that impending object because your nervous tissue is communicating that you need to be protecting yourself. So it's sending signals, and it can work throughout the body. It's also controlling your organs. It's helping you react to your environment and adapt to the signals that are surrounding you. There are two basic cell types with nervous tissue, what we call neurons, N-E-U-R-O-N-S, neurons, and then neuroglia. Neuroglia are modified. There's a variety of different types of neuroglia, and most textbooks will tell you for each neuron there are about 10 neuroglial cells. You may see differing numbers depending on the source, but about 1 neuron to each 10 neuroglia. So the neuron is sort of the most important cell, and then the neuroglia are modified to support and protect and maybe nourish the neurons. So when we look at an individual neuron, this is what a smear, so if you would take a sample and make what we call a smear on a microscope slide, this is what you might see. It almost looks like a star. It's got a central area where you'd find the nucleus of the cell and the sort of typical components, the Golgi apparatus and various things. But the central area where you see the nucleus is called the cell body of the neuron. Then all these arm-like structures that extend out, the extensions that are carrying signals towards the cell body are called dendrites. And there's usually more dendrites per neuron than the other extension we're going to mention next. So dendrites carrying information towards the cell body will interpret all those signals and send information away in axons. So axon, A-X-O-N, that's going to carry information away from the cell body. And there's a nice picture, a nice diagram numbered with the name in your lab manual so that you can visualize that. So the neuron itself, cell body with a nucleus, dendrites carrying things towards the cell body, and axons carrying things away. The neuron can have more than one axon, but typically we think of 1 or 2 axons per neuron. And they might communicate with other neurons, or they might communicate with muscle or some other tissues of the body. The neuroglia then, you see a lot of different neuroglia kind of represented here. The neuroglial cells are modified to perhaps surround the neuron. So one of the ones that we'll talk about is called a Schwann cell, just like the Schwann man that delivers ice cream or turkey or something to your home. The Schwann cells, S-C-H-W-A-N-N, are almost like, I think of them almost like a hot dog bun surrounding the hot dog, which would be the axon. So they protect and insulate the neuron and help it really speed up its signaling between the neurons. So that's just one example. Schwann cells are just one example of a type of neuroglial cell. Your lab manual doesn't really go into a whole lot of examples of neuroglia. They just say that there are several types. Your textbook goes into a little more detail with astrocytes and some others. I'm not going to ask you to memorize those. I want you to know neurons, the basic parts of a neuron, and that neuroglial cells would surround and protect the neurons. And so again, to summarize, we've talked about 4 tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. And the idea would be that you could look at an image and recognize it. So for the lab quiz that I'll be posting later, you'll see images and you'll be able to label what they are. So think about things like cell shape, cell arrangement, and hopefully you'll be able to recognize these various tissue types.